But I mean, I agree with you. I'm not a supporter of Kamala Harris, but that is just for the simple reason that I have politics that she doesn't have. I mean, this is on
Yeah,
some level, it's crystal clear stuff. I want radical prison reform. I want Medicare for all. I want the United States to stop backing coups. I don't want to support Israeli apartheid.
Oh God, the Israel stuff is insane.
But it's
terrible.
not. It's
It's
but
terrible.
it's well. But
She's worse on Israel than the average Democrat.
I don't know. I don't agree with that. I think she's
Yes,
totally
she is.
representative. No, she's not. There's what daylight does she have from any other standard issue Democrat? If you look at what Elizabeth Warren was saying about the Israeli bombardment of Gaza in 2014, it's essentially the same thing. And that's actually a good example, I would say, of being very careful, because I think that her record and what she said about Israel Palestine is abominable. I think it's depressingly barely, not even distinguishable from pretty much any other major frontline politician besides Bernie Sanders, and maybe if Warren is pivoting. And then the third point, which is like, there's a context here. The context is Kamala Harris, when she was getting her start, a cynical, pragmatic move to being a national political figure as both someone who's going to be called liberal, not to mention a woman of color, is to appear, quote unquote, tough on crime. That's the calculation. And everybody has made the calculation that it is so safer from a media, donor, and voting base to say, well, maybe I have a little bit of concern about, Netanyahu, demanding that all, I mean, I'm not even, the analogy I thought of is actually kind of anti-Semitic, so I won't say that. But, they will defend anything Israel does, anytime, anywhere, any place. And that's been typical of the Democratic Party until some symbolic gestures that Obama made, like in the last year he was in office. So I wouldn't say, I mean, I think she's abominable, but I don't think she's exceptional. Look up Christian Gillibrand's record. Chuck Schumer says that part of his mandate for being in the Senate is Hashem has sent him messages about
Right.
Israel. I mean, this is normal shit.
Yeah, I guess I was kind of measuring her against Obama, and I will admit that I only recently really began paying attention to Israel stuff.
Obama was obviously on the whole supported Israel anytime, anywhere, any place, but Obama slightly was willing to, at the very least, as if you talk to any Israeli policy person who's on even the center left, they would say, could you at least, like in the same way that like theoretically Democrats support like the Labor Party over the Conservative Party in Britain, could you like at least support us in like the vague center left in Israel versus any fascist government and fascist politician in Israel? And Obama was slightly willing to do that, partially compounded by the fact, I think that, he genuinely abhors racism, and also the fact that he had to deal with Netanyahu for several years. And after sitting at a certain point, you're going to just be like, dude, fuck you. Because he's a profoundly unlikable person. But no, I don't. No, I think, yeah. I mean, we're going to play Kamala Harris's Israel clip, and I think at some point the Democratic Party as a whole is going to have to reconcile the tension between, embracing a very particular type of narrow multiculturalism, which is clearly, obviously preferable to white supremacy, should go without saying. I don't know how that fits. Well, there's actually one way that fits for blind support with Israel, which is actually another manifestation of the toxicity of a certain type of identity politics, frankly. And one of the reasons that I have a real allergy to essentialist arguments and identity over all else is growing up partially in the Jewish community and being like, no, my having a certain part of my identity be Jewish doesn't mean that I support dropping white phosphorus on children and not allowing people to have freedom of movement because of an identity code, or even the fact that, of course, Jewish people historically are one of the most oppressed, abused, and genocided people on the planet. So, maybe some people will reconcile it by just sort of, the same kind of shallow identity plays of any other move. But if you're really fundamentally running on overcoming supremacy, race hierarchies, and structural racism, you're going to support a Likud government in Israel? Yeah, that doesn't work. And for what it's worth, I think Obama, who has some, at least I think on that front, some very genuine commitments, actually, he at least intellectually recognized the tension. Most of these other people are just getting the script. Hillary Clinton's just getting the script. Joe Biden is, my God, just getting the script.
Oh my God.
Beto O'Rourke slightly deviated once when there was the bombardment, I think in 2014, and then was, cattle prodded back into line. So, we'll play this Kamala. Thanks for the call, Josh. Let's play this Kamala Harris clip now. But again, I mean, this is terrible, and this should be making the rounds. And I think that there should be a clip. And by the way, look, Bernie is getting better on this. I'm sure you could find some clips of Bernie saying stuff not as bad as this, but some pretty bad stuff in defense of Israeli actions. But this is horrible, but it's emblematic of I would, in my estimation, I don't think Kamala Harris is much of a progressive, but this is, progressive except Palestine is what they used to call it. So here is Kamala Harris.
In the midst of uncertainty and turmoil, America's support for Israel's security must be rock solid. And as Iran continues to launch ballistic missiles, while it arms and funds its terrorist proxy Hezbollah, we must stand with Israel. As Hamas maintains its control of Gaza and fires rockets across Israel's southern border, we must stand with Israel. And as ISIS and civil war in Syria destabilize the region, displacing millions and threatening shared security interests, we must support all those affected by ongoing violence and terror, and we must stand with Israel. Our defense relationship is critical to both nations, which is why I support the United States' commitment to provide Israel with $38 billion in military assistance over the next decade. It is why I support full funding for Israel, including for the Arrow, David Sling, and the Iron Dome missile defense systems, which save lives. And that's why I am fully committing to maintaining Israel's qualitative military edge.
So this is the usual pablum, and we're going to get to another candidate in a second, but I just want to be really clear about this. I mean, look, this is the rhetoric, even in an Israeli context, that is just delusional. And of such an extreme far-right position. This is in 2017, by the way, where already there's been a touch of a crack at just the basic incoherence of blindly supporting this Israeli government and professing any type of commitment to anti-discrimination or not indiscriminately killing civilians. So you've had 2009, you had 2014, both of those massacres in Gaza that were both recognized internationally as such. In Israel, though, Ehud Olmert, as an example, former Israeli prime minister, look him up, definitely committed atrocities in Lebanon and Gaza, also put the only legitimate two-state solution plan on the table, and is an interesting figure. Just got out of jail for corruption. But we all know how I feel about corruption. I don't care. But he said, he's like, look, Israel needs to understand that we are not under threat. We're not. They have nuclear weapons. They have complete military supremacy over any of their neighbors. And their primary military responsibilities are policing a Jim Crow situation in the West Bank and having a siege on Gaza. You can talk to Israeli intelligence and military people. They'll say, it's very bad for us that the main workouts that our soldiers get are harassing Palestinian civilians. Terrorism was a very real issue at one point. And there's atrocities definitely in the early aughts of Hamas blowing up pizza parlors and examples. like this. First of all, you could put a security barrier inside 67 borders. The fact that they put it well into the expansion of settlements says a lot. And then furthermore, because they've never stopped constructing settlements and the demographic realities, 2 states is out the window as a matter of practicality. And if you have any type of democratic commitment, you would support the Joint List Arab Parties, which is a coalition of secularists and communists, both Jewish, Arab, as well as some Muslim, who are advocating for an across-the-board democracy. That's it. So that being said, in a moment like this, I'd really like a leftist, a progressive, uncompromising crusader for the rights of all to step forward. And man, we just found a great Tulsi Gabbard clip talking about Palestinian human rights just in the nick of time. This is from Sunday, so this is fresh. This is really exciting. Oh, wait, no. This is from 2016? Okay. This is from 2016. Well, whatever. December 2018. Okay, so this is all right. Well, all right, we'll figure it out. But anyways, this is Tulsi Gabbard laying it down for the rights of all, or not.
Get away from 50 years of occupation and nothing happening besides for violence.
That is a complex question that requires peace, being able to have those conversations to build a path towards peace. And the short answer really is, unfortunately, with the current leadership in place, they are getting farther and farther away from the possibility or the path, building that pathway towards peace and towards that two-state solution, recognizing the respect, the equality, and the humanity of all the people who are living within that region.
Pablum. When was this?
December 2018 in New Hampshire.
Yeah, so this doesn't mean a fucking thing. And again, I love that Matt pointed out, right? The prevarication is which leadership, of course, because that can be signaled to anybody. What she's signaling the audience is obviously Netanyahu and the far right in Israel, because it's a pro-Palestinian human rights question. But anybody else could say, oh, well, obviously, of course, she's talking about Hamas, which controls Gaza. Now, of course, there's only one faction. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank are the only formation there that still is doing anything to support a two-state solution. Everybody else has moved on, except actually Hamas has kind of prevaricated on that. But that is not, like, by 2016, Bernie Sanders was willing to come out and give a speech where he spoke at least frankly about the humanitarian toll on Palestinians.
Yeah.
She did nothing.
He turned down his invitation to AIPAC, which
right.
is huge in the context of American politics. And
That's right.
People want to criticize Bernie from the left, and I have plenty of left criticisms of him myself. But on this particular issue, like, he is by far the best that we are going to do as of now with a viable presidential candidate. And like, he actually has a chance. So
definitely,
let's not mess that up. Also, he's very well positioned to combat charges of anti-Semitism, because the man is undeniably Jewish, whether or not he's Jewish in the way that these people want him to be. And like, honestly, I don't have a poll in front of me, but that's a lot of Jews in America. We don't all support the things that Israel does.
No, particularly younger Jewish people are definitely pivoting on that issue.
Also, her answer, she says, we basically the Palestinians have to be peaceful before we try to work towards peace. She says everybody. But
And by the way, that's 100% right. And just to really put a fine point on this, okay? So, and I agree that you have to reject, of course, things like suicide bombing and any tactic that focuses on civilians, period. You have to have full stops on things, right? I'm not drawing an equivalency, but there's certain things you have to reject if you want to have a position of getting to a just place. And killing Israeli civilians with suicide bombings is totally unacceptable, obviously. Now, there's other tactics in guerrilla war that I'm not going to comment on, and I'll just say they're a lot more complicated. But anything that targets civilians, we can discard, including, of course, Israeli indiscriminate killing of civilians. And every side here has blood on its hands. It's just there's a total asymmetry of power, so you can't draw a false equivalency. but generically every side has blood on its hands. But what's amazing about this talking point, and I don't know where Tulsi stands on the attempt to criminalize BDS movement, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel, which has been happening across the United States. It's an actual real-life First Amendment issue. The one. The Palestinians have been lectured by a government that runs an apartheid state on them and a superpower that supplies that apartheid state with weapons and money and exports people from Brooklyn to build settlements there. While they do that, they've had the temerity to lecture Palestinians on how they should conduct their struggle. And, the same people upholding an occupation are like, well, where's the Palestinian Gandhi? Where's the Palestinian Mandela? Well, actually, interestingly enough, Mandela said that South Africa wasn't fully free till Palestine was free. Just a little point of reference. So excusing that just monumental, grotesque hypocrisy that anybody that has any role in the oppression of Palestinians has anything to say about how they conduct themselves, they did generate a mass global nonviolent movement modeled on the South Africa model. It's called boycott, divestment, and sanctions, of which you're criminalizing and equating to terrorism. So, just the complete fusion of immorality, delusion, paranoia, and racism that people bring to that discussion is just awe-inspiringly disgusting. And actually, yes, a good early preview of the profound dead end of nationalism, the profound dead end of a certain type of reductionist identity politics.